like either it would be getting the results based on its own trained data sets, or maybe calling third-party services to fulfill the demand. So that's what I feel. It's more like an integrated, you know, uh, LLM model or IDE in general sense.
Yeah, that's correct. So in addition to that, for example, nowadays the ChatGPT or any AI tool which interacts with websites as well. For example, if you want to compare mobile, Ravi, can you go on mute, please?
Incoming voice call from SR38KSD1.
Ravi, sorry, we are getting more noise from you. Thanks. So yeah, so we were talking about AI, right? For example, nowadays we usually compare multiple models. For example, if you want to buy iPhone, so then we want to know how what is the previous version and what is its capability and what is the current model features. So basically, in the back and the behind the scene, for example, it's working as a crawl is nothing but it's a web page searches where it interacts with the multiple websites to get a real time data. Because, for example, if you go with Apple product, it's their website has the latest information which ChatGPT pulls and it will give a summarize in the requested format. So along with based upon, for example, the chat gpt, let's say in a fraction of second 10 million users are utilizing the chat gpt as a big data center which help us to search faster in a fraction of a second. So there are many concepts behind the scene, but as a users or a developers we know what result it provides, right? But so today topic is also in a similar manner where instead of to search the websites or the trained model, the MCP will help us to get the data from our any organization which has, for example, nowadays many organizations use CRM or ERP, which is nothing but Salesforce or Microsoft Dynamic 365, or it can be any payment gateway data, or it can be e-commerce websites, right? So within that, how this MCP integrates and it gives data to the users in a real time. So that's what we are going to see in action. So yeah, uh, since we are waiting for Karthik, who is our organization organizer to this meeting, so that's where it's getting delayed. Hi
Yeah,
Karthik.
I'm there. I'm there. Yes. Sorry about the
Thanks
delay.
Karthik. Yeah,
I couldn't join the link from here.
no problem. Yeah. So can we start, Karthik?
Yes, yes, of course. Go ahead. Let's
Yeah.
skip the other topics about introduction and then about talking about Oslo and stuff. Let's go straight into the topic. You can start, Sandil.
Yeah. Let me share my screen. Okay. So, since we talked more, so I'll just give a small introduction about myself. I have a 12 plus years of IT industry experience with development and integrating multiple system. Along with, I have completed developer and architect certificate, and I have experience with the SnapLogic tool as well. It's similar to MuleSoft. Along with, I have experience in full stack developer as well. So moving on to the agenda today, we'll be talking more on MCP. So first we need to know what is MCP and how that journey started and how it's important or benefits to the organization or users or a developer. Along with we will explore more on architecture, MCP architecture, and what is the core component details, along with what is client and server within MCP, and how many transport modes available within MCP, along with what is proxy in MCP. Along, we'll be exploring more on MCP lifecycle and the live demo, along with question and answers. So, I just want to give a little, give a little journey of MCP. Basically, MCP started, to help us to integrate data services, in organization. But before that, this MCP, before this journey, there are multiple phases. So, first it evolved with generative AI, along with, let's say, we whatever the models available in the market will be utilizing, and we are generating a response. So further, the generative AI is enhanced with the LLM with the context. So context here is nothing but it understands the previous history, what we are discussing. Based upon that, it will provide more helpful information or accurate information to the relevant topic. So with this, the MCP comes into picture, where because the generative AI or LLM is a pre-trained models or live interaction, but it will not give a real-time data information in the organization. So that's where this MCP comes into picture to integrate a generative AI along with external data services. When I say external data services, it can be database, or it can be a Salesforce, or it can be any file system or SFTP. So it can be any systems. So coming to since we talk about MCP, so I just want to give a little overview on what is MCP here. So model. So as we know, currently we have a ChatGPT 5 model, but it can be any model which whatever the prompt we provide, it thinks and it generates a response. So and along with the context. So context is nothing but what information for example, if you want to analyze any paragraph, it understand and it gives corresponding information, right? So similarly, in the MCP as well, it requires a model to think and generate a response, and the context to understand what information we provide. Basically, we are giving a AI to understand our natural language, on what context it needs to generate a response, along with protocol. So here the protocol is nothing but it's a, for example, we usually talk more protocols, right? For example, in HTTPs, again HTTP or HTTPS, along with SOAP services. So there are multiple protocols available, but along with this, MCP is one of the standard format which integrate with the AI models. So, like as I given an overview, basically it helps us to integrate apps or data with a large language model. Along with it, standardize how application can be, with the context. It integrates with the LLM, and it provides seamless communication with agents and external systems. So this is a just for example, this diagram denotes where for example, we have many desktop tools, or it can be for example, it's a cloud A, or it can be any uh, for example, we have a any point code builder, or it can be any other system or chatbot, or it can be any AI application which interacts with the MCP. And MCP, again, it's a integration, or it's a protocol to connect with any data or file system, or it can be a development tools nowadays, ACB or GitHub, or it can be any development tools which has capability to interact to analyze our code, and it will suggest best practices to standardize the format. And it can be MCP can be integrated with multiple productivity tools also, like for example, Slack is a messaging channel, and Google Map, or it can be any other productive tools. So basically, MCP is a protocol which interacts between AI system and the any external data systems. So why MCP is important? for example, nowadays developers, let's say we are starting a project, but developer wants to understand the best practices, how to generate a mule project, and how to externalize the properties or data view. So everything it can be simplified with the MCP, which again communicates with the AI models along with our local system to generate a project, and to simplify and to reduce development time as well. Along with it can be this MCP again, as I mentioned, it can be integrated with multiple AI applications, uh, with to increase performance, and it will give a more accuracy information about real data. And for an end user, for example, if we want to communicate with a any chatbot with a e-commerce website, or can be a hospitalization booking appointment system, or it can be any product defect. So where MCP where comes into picture, and it interacts with the corresponding product with the, for a particular uses, by getting certain information about email ID or phone number, and relevant information it will provide to solve the end user informations. So how this MCP works? So we just now talked about what is MCP, but when we talk about MCP architecture, it works in a manner of client and server architecture. So basically, we know the client, for example, our browser is a client, and the server, it's again connects with the backend system to to get the data from the database. So it works in a client server architecture, but in when it comes to MCP again, for MCP, the any AI tools which is client, and they, with the help of MCP protocol, it communicates with multiple data systems to get the information. And MCP use JSON RPC. JSON, as we know, the JSON is a key value notation. Along with it, it use remote procedure call, which is secure transport mode to communicate with the multiple data source systems. So so basically MCP again, it has more life cycle, where it can it needs we need to provide what is the context we are looking for, and how many and it contains it has its own prompt library, along with tool accesses. For example, we need to know the MCP readiness, or to list how many MCP listeners available within the organization. So there can be any number of tools available within this MCP server, which is nothing but I just listed few things like context provider or tool catalog, or it can be a resource manager, or it can be a prompt library. So basically, these are all internally which help us to expose MCP endpoints outside of the world to interact with from a application to the external data services to get the data. So we in the current market, MCP has multiple client system. For example, we have a VS Code, or it can be Postman, it can be a Slack. So these are the clients which interacts its own MCP server, and will give the relevant information. So I'll just showcase more in a live demo, but here I'll just walk you through what are the client applications available in the market. And as I mentioned that the clients again which required server which equivalent to the data source system to provide the relevant information based upon the prompt or context we provide to the AI model. So again, So I'll pause here, and I just want to understand from audience, you know, to help me to understand how, for example, the REST API or SOAP services. So what transport modes it's use, so that it will be useful to know more on MCP transport modes. So anyone can able to answer? Okay. So no worries. So we will be, in MCP world, we have a two transport mode. One is studio transport, and another one is streamable HTTP transport mode. So basically, this mode is helps in a different way. For example, if you want to do some operation within our laptop, okay, so we'll be, utilizing the studio mode. If you want to utilize, via HTTPS, we'll be using streamable HTTP transport mode. Basically, it helps, it's again, when we want to develop something and we want to test in our local system, we can use this studio transport mode. When let's say if we want to move the MCP server or MCP tools which we developed, when we move to the production, or it can be any environment, so we'll be using this streamable HTTP transport mode, to interact seamlessly. So as I described more on MCP architecture, I just want to highlight these few things. One is called resource, tools, and prompts. So resource is nothing but it can be a data source or a object exposed by MCP server. And for example, as I mentioned, it can be a file system or it can be a database. So when it comes to tools, basically these tools helps us. It's kind of a translate, where from a application to the data service, where if any data exposed in a JSON format, it translate into the certain natural language, and it will send to the a application, which can be a readable format for the users. And the prompt is nothing but it can be whatever the information we provided, whatever the information we provide in the AI application will be able to understand MCP, and MCP will able to convert into corresponding data format, and it will summarize the content accordingly. So how MCP proxy works? So basically, let's say we have a multiple clients. For it can be, uh, any AI application like Gemini AI or Chat GPT, which it needs to connect with proxy to connect with multiple data system. So let's say if you're not having proxy, what it happens, all clients or MCP clients will connect individually to the corresponding AI application and connect to the data source, which is again messy. So that's where we want to do a setup called MCP proxy, which again any MCP client can be utilize this proxy, which allows to read or write data to the data source systems. So basically here's the configuration which we need to perform for MCP system to be to be enabled to the organization. So here again it's given a certain for a demo purpose, but it can be more configuration which we can able to configure. So so here, for example, this MCP demo is I'm using MCP proxy, which connects with our MuleSoft application. And there is another MuleSoft SAP. This is again naming convention, which we can able to give accordingly. So here, as we can see here, I have configured two MCP server. One is to connect with the cloud hub, and the other one is to connect in our local system to generate a MuleSoft project, or to follow API lifecycle where it can be achievable with this MCP server, where it generates a raml and publish raml into the exchange, and once it's developed publish exchange into cloud, and again it pulls that exchange information and it develops a project, and it's deployed into the cloud hub. So I'll just showcase in the live action, but this is how we need to set up a configuration, which is nothing but a proxy. So in order to set up a MCP proxy, we need with the MuleSoft we need any point platform, or it can be ACB, or it can be a MuleSoft code. Along with today for the demo, I'll be using a data source, nothing but a Salesforce. Along with we need a MCP connector. So we as our API has a life cycle. Similarly, the MCP is also having a life cycle to design and to design, build, and manage, and we can able to monitor as well. So again, for MCP, it has its own raml cycle, along with which we can import to the studio, and we can scaffold accordingly. We can generate a flow, and from there we can deploy and monitor the MCP applications. Even we can able to secure MCP application like with any client ID enforcement, or it can be OAuth, or it can be any according to our needs. So in MuleSoft, as we have a module or palette which it can we can install MCP, and accordingly it can have multiple operations. So for example, the MuleSoft MCP client has exposed few operations called tools, or it can be list resource, or it can be resource listener and tool listener. So I'll where when we talk about resource listener, so as I explained, we have a multiple transport mode, right? So those listener we need to configure in order to expose in a public endpoint which interacts with to the data source. Yeah. So I'll just showcase a demo for for a better idea. So for example, as I mentioned, this is a cloudy tool which helping me to interact with the Salesforce system. So for example, if I want to take so let's say I'm asking ChatGPT to book an appointment. Okay, so it will not know on which hospital it needs to book hospital, sorry, book an appointment, or which time. For example, if I give to book an appointment 10 a.m. for general checkup. So ChatGPT right away it says at so yeah, so as we can see, it just correcting the text, but it is not able to make an appointment to the any hospital, or it's not asking what is the correct information to book an appointment. So that's where the MCP comes into picture. So as we can see here, so I have developed a flow which create a patient, for a particular patient, it creates appointment details, and it can able to send an acknowledgement email which saying that at what time we booked, and we can able to reschedule the appointment, or we can, if you want to know, we can able to get the appointment details as well. So how this I have configured this is, for example, this cloudy tool we need to install, and we have to do a configuration. So we have to navigate to the setting, and we have a developers tab where we need to add a certain information. So for example, I think I've already opened here. So this is a configuration which we need to add in order to establish MCP to the cloud, cloud AI tools, or it can be a cloud AI client. So here I have told that on this port expose MCP server for this is again I have explored for a doctor appointment. Again, this same configuration I have applied for the HTTPS as well. So where it interacts with a cloud up, and it exposed this operations for us to help us to create an appointment. For example, I'm just giving an example like book an appointment for tomorrow 10 a.m. So what it will do is it will look for a resource. The resource is nothing but, so basically it understand which MCP server it needs to call to get the to book an appointment. So I'll just give for example, I'll just give this information. As we can see, it's a natural language. We just say book an appointment, and it understand, and it is able to asking a certain information. For example, it asks about contact details and email address I provided, but still it requires what is the email address, and what is the purpose of appointment, and how duration is required. So I say and I'll say purpose is a general checkup for 30 minutes. So what it will do, as I exposed MCP in a different flow, it is able to create an appointment. So as I mentioned, it's using a JSON or RPC format, which is again for a user it will be JSON format, but it communicates with the to the corresponding transport mode, and it says that its appointment confirmation is booked, and it says the email has sent to this particular email address. So this is where the MCP in a real time to the organization, it's exposed via chatbot, or it can be any website. It We can expose MCP flows to the but again, this MCP flow will not be visible to the user, but for demo purpose we are using this. But in a real time it can be a chatbot, or it can be any website which allows to book instantly for any type of models. So, for example, this is a AI generated, because let's say if we want to generate a email, we have to format email format, right? It can be HTML or in XML tag, which we need to form what needs to be displayed here. But with the MCP and AI models integrated, it understands it takes my username, and it says this appointment is booked on this date along with the necessary information. So this is how the full life cycle of the MCP, which we need to configure in any cloud a tool, and it with the help of this configuration, it interacts with this API, and it exposes the tools which we developed. Accordingly, it able to realize which flow it needs to go, and do action accordingly. So the other way is, I just want to showcase, for example, this is another AI tool called Windsurf, which again, since we have only one configuration or the MCP proxy, which able to recognize how many MCP where we configured. Accordingly, it enables the corresponding tools, and with this help of this, we can able to interact with the AI models to generate our own actions or the purpose. So as I just want to showcase, like, uh, there are multiple a MCP servers available. For example, if we want to use file system, for example, if I want, in order to use file system, we have to provide a input. For example, if we can able to give our local folder here, which again, AI utilize this, and it can do these operations. It can read file, or it can move, or it can search within the file, or it can return a metadata. So it can do a lot of operations based upon the folder or files we provided here. So this is one of the easiest way which we expose our certain data sources to the AI models to utilize, and gives our corresponding data in a simpler manner. So for any doubts, so that I can pause here, but I just want to give some time to audience to help us if any questions. Okay, so if no more questions, I'll be moving on to explain how MCP I configured in MuleSoft. So as a first step, we need to install MCP via Exchange model, where for example, I've already installed this MCP, but this is where we need to search MCP, and when we installed, it exposed these tools. So in this, I'm utilizing the tool listener, which again helping us to expose the API, corresponding API. For example, as I showed here, we have a multiple operations, right? So if you see, like these are all the flows which I have enabled in MuleSoft, but with the any client tool, these tools are available to help us to interact with corresponding flow. So for example, this is a flow which I configured MCP tool, and what, for example, in order to get an appointment, we need to give either email or phone number, so which we need to give a corresponding prompt to this to listener, which basically look for this information. If by providing this information, it will again go to the flow to get the corresponding information from the corresponding data. So for example, here I just given as so I've just as like we do integrate, right? But here the only difference is we are using a MCP tool instead of listener. So let's say based upon the input, because the MCP provides a JSON structure. With this payload, we have to transform what information we want to send to the corresponding data source to get the information. So for example, I just just given a certain information about email address or phone number, which formed automatically in a JSON request, which sent to MuleSoft certain the payload information, which I am querying to the Salesforce. This is a way which I'm just, since it's Salesforce, in order to retrieve from the Salesforce, we need to form certain query where wherever it stores, we have to give the corresponding object and the corresponding query parameters, and it will give the corresponding corresponding response. Based upon this response, the AI tool automatically convert to us, the certain information, and followed by it sends a email. So in order to send a email, again, I have a different flow, but again, this is exposed via MCP tool. So as we can see here, there are multiple flow. For example, get appointment, create appointment, update patient information, and reschedule and send email. So what MCP or AI tool with integrating MCP, it understand based upon our natural language, it understand which flow it should choose, and correspondingly it will form a JSON request, and it will send to this flow where we can able to manipulate data accordingly to the our integration need. But only one thing which we need to note here, it is so in order to in order to AI to understand what information we need to send to the corresponding flow, we need to form a JSON schema. For example, to send a email, we need email address and email body and email for example, email body, and email subject. So with this information, the AI models will send a request to this tool listener, and it able to create a corresponding email information, whatever we described in this MuleSoft flow. So
Just 1 minute, Center. Is anyone has any questions? Feel free to ask questions. Raise your hand. Okay, please.
Yes, so I have one question, Senthil.
yeah,
Can you hear me?
yeah, I can hear.
Okay, good. So, in every flow in the implementation part, it has a
Mhm.
MCP listener, tool listener at the start. So,
Right.
I mean, I haven't tried it in a way where, we build API kit routers, right? And that automatically navigates, I mean, the flow navigates to different resources.
That's
So
correct.
suppose if all this implementation are resources, right? And there's a API kit router. So in that case, will there be only one MCP tool listener on the, the starting listener part?
Exactly. So
Or
that's where I was explained about MuleSoft MCP life cycle. So in
Mhm.
order to this is a demo purpose. Like we can define as many tool listener we want, but in a real time we need to follow MCP life cycle where we should generate a YAML, the specification, and
Okay.
that specification this with the help of API kit router, it navigate to the corresponding flows. So we no need to define multiple tool listener.
Okay. So if we go in this tool listener configuration part, can you go to the configuration part?
Yeah.
So in that case, the description would have, this description section, not the config, just the the connector. Yeah. So the description would have all the details about the different features it offers, correct?
Yeah,
And
that's so
parameter
basic.
schema would also be changed.
Yeah, so basically, when we use API kit router, right? So this
Mhm.
parameter schema will be defining everything in the RAML, because the RAML is again a contract between applications, right, or the endpoints. So that's where we define this in front. We don't need to specifically mention it on the tool listener always.
Okay, okay, understood. Okay, fine. That answers it. Thank you.
Yeah. So again, when we talk about MCP server configuration, as I talked about, multiple modes, right? One is streamable HTTP server and SSC server. So this is where it looks like. For example, if I'm using SSC server, which again utilize our HTTP listener in build, because it needs to expose via some port number, right? So that's where we need to configure listener, and we should. This is a standard endpoint for the MCP to expose multiple tools within the project. So This where this is again the configurations needed to expose MCP flows. And yeah, so far we discussed about how MuleSoft it's interact with any data source system. For example, here I mentioned about a Salesforce scenario, but it can be any database, or it can be any queuing mechanism, or it can be any file system as well. So in a real time, based upon our prompt, it able to interact with the MuleSoft flow, and with the necessary configuration or corresponding input which we provide. Accordingly, it will able to give a result set. So again, the MCP is not limited to this. I'll just showcase one more demo in action, so that we'll be in good shape. Let me, because this cloudy what happens in locally, right? So let's say if you open for a long time, it catching and it's giving same information. So usually it's good practice to quit from here and reopen, so that it can work as expected. So now I'll just ask to create a because the MuleSoft product provided a MCP server which expose to help developers to create a project within the with to help us to create a project basically. So for example, so these are all the uh, uh, tools available to generate a MuleSoft project and to follow full life cycle. So I just say that create a MuleSoft, uh, create a allowable and deploy into cloud. So normally what we will do, we have to create a project manually, and we need to deploy manually or with the help of pipeline, right? But again, with the help of with this MCP tools available in the market, as we can see, it's utilizing this tool called Create MuleSoft project, which is nothing but these are the tools, around 18 tools available in order to utilize for a MuleSoft project generation, or it can be where we can list, or we can able to generate a raml, and we can run in our local. Yeah, so I just given, just saying create allowed project, but again, can be a more descriptive as well. For example, create a flow with the database with the best practices to follow, with the application properties, and these are the configurations. It will help us to create. As you can see here, the project is automatically created on particular location. So if I go to this location, my system is, yeah, we can, the folder is automatically created, and it created a corresponding folder structure along with corresponding the properties. Since based upon the prompt, it is able to react, but I just told to generate a allowable program. So if I open this, Okay, meantime let it open. So I'll just show, as we can see here, I just told, just create a MuleSoft application and deploy in Cloud 2.0. So based upon the MCP configuration or the proxy configuration, it is able to create a project, and from the project it is able to deploy into the cloud app. So this is very useful, in a day-to-day life for a developer, in order to automate corresponding flows. So again, this is because I've just told certain information, right? So yeah, it's deployed. So, and what it's, if you see the this cloudy AI tool, it's describing in a simpler manner what it does. It's created a project, and it generated a flow, and after generating flow, it needs to create some payload, right? So it's created a flow name and the corresponding payload, and it's started deploying in the cloud app. How it knows it where it needs to deploy, again, so that we need to configure here, because the any one platform can be accessible via client ID and secret, right? So this is where this is the organization client ID and secret, and I downloaded this MCP server in the local, and it's always in a start mode. So any AI cloud will expose that MCP server information, and it is able to, based upon the command or prompt we provide, it is able to react, and it's successfully created and deployed in the cloud app. So let's say if I want to say, create, for example, create integration project with database and file system, and create standard. So I'm just now I've just given a complex instruction to this, where it able to understand, and again for it will do the same same steps, but it will based upon the prompt which we provided, it is able to generate. So before we told to create a hello world, now it will be generating a project called DB file system integration. It is able to recognize, and as we can see, it is able to generate a flow with the corresponding database information. For example, it's I've not said which schema it needs to pull, but the AI thinks in a such a way which it forms the payload and the logger information, because as I mentioned, to give a standard format, so it is able to give, and once it's generated, so now it is again file. I told file system, again it utilizes local file, local folder, and basically it will retrieve data from database and write into the file in a CSV format. So now if we go and see here, okay, since it's still generating, as we can see, it's generating the XML along with the properties in order to make standard. Still the action is going on, so we need to wait for few minutes. Let's say if you want to do this in manually, what it will do, it will be taking 1 day or 2 day to complete this project with the corresponding structure. But as we can see here, the with the help of AI model with MCP, it is able to solve in a minute. Not, I would say it's less than a minute to create this whole structure, and it kept in our local system. So let's say if I'm going here, I'll able to see another project called it's generated at 801 with the corresponding structure. So let's say if if I import this, it will have all best practices which it follows as we do. So again, the MCP, it's not limited to the anything. That's what the conclusion is. So it can able to generate. It can developer works or routine works what we do on a daily basis. Like if you see here, it is able to okay. So it's complete. I think still it's generating. Yeah. So it's maybe taking time. So now if we see, it will deploy automatically based upon the we provided into the cloud. So that's all from my side. Any doubts? Maybe I can stop here. Please let me know if anything you want to understand how it works or the configuration. I can happy to help you out.
Thanks, Until. Any questions, team? Is anyone has any questions? Please ask. Any questions, please? Uday, Dheeras, Manisha, Swapna. I got it.
So we have enabled question and answers tab also. If you cannot talk, please type.